Welcome, everyone. This is the Driving the Business of Science podcast. And my name is Keith Parent. I am the CEO of Court Square Group. We are a managed service firm managing infrastructure for life science companies. The goal of this podcast is just to talk to people that I've talked with over the years that I thought were a part of the ecosystem for life science. In Court Square, being a managed service provider, we also have a system called RegDocs 365, which is a content repository for both clinical and regulatory content. So we see a lot of people across the spectrum from preclinical all the way through manufacturing. And I think that what's interesting is the number of people that we see and the number of companies in the space are far beyond what anyone would really think about from a life sciences perspective. Most people think about the scientists and developing new products and new drugs and new medical devices. But I think there's so much that goes into life science that is beyond that I think it's interesting that we cover some of that. Today, we're going to have with us Christa Bleyleben, who is one of the managing partners of MassGlobal Partners. And she's going to give us, she'll introduce herself and what MassGlobal Partners is all about. And then we'll just have a great conversation. Christa, welcome aboard today.
Well, thank you, Keith. It's great to be with you. We've met probably, some 20 or so years ago.
Oh, it's been a long time. Christa and I actually first met when she was working for a company called Moiety. Well, it's actually a Massachusetts organization called Moiety, Mass Office of International Trade and Investment. And we did a project out in Milan. So that was a wonderful introduction. Thank you, Christa.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's when we first connected. Yeah. So great to be with you. So my name is Christa Bleyleben. I'm a banker by original training. I spent many years in corporate investment banking and then moved, as Keith just said, to run the Massachusetts Office of International Trade and Investment, and was also the president of the Eastern Trade Council. But that was a little bit too much politics for me. And then about 10 or so years ago, I moved here to the Cambridge Innovation Center, and this is where I am currently. And I'm partnering with the Cambridge Innovation Center, or CIC as it's known. And we are a small firm. I have several partners, and we work primarily with international early and growth stage companies. And the idea is to really help these companies figuring out a pathway into the United States. It is, after all, the largest market, especially in the life sciences. And so there's a lot of companies from all over the world that are figuring out how to enter this market successfully and profitably. So what we do is we run programs, usually between 1 week and sometimes several months. And it's roll up your sleeves, and it's intended to be for the C-level, the founders, CEOs, other senior members of the company, to really get a hands-on first look. How do you do business in the United States? And what that means is, what's your value proposition for the US? Doesn't have to be the same exactly from the country you're coming from. How do you position yourself? How you tell your story? How do you tell the story to a US audience so that someone really gets it and understands what your value proposition is? How do you find the right resources? How do you connect with all the, this is you need a whole family of support. How do you connect with the right people? And how do you do networking? How is the cultural difference, and so forth? So it's quite sometimes we take it for granted, since we've been working in the US for so long. We take it for granted how you do your networking and how you do your follow-up, and how do you talk to very efficiently to potential investors or partners. But when you come from abroad, it's a very different story. So that's what we really, do. And we're really trying to move the needle for the founders and co-founders and C-level people. And typically we run cohorts, because we feel it's more productive to actually, there's a lot of team building between different, members of a cohort. And these cohorts can be anywhere from 4, 5 companies to, we have as large as 20 companies, which I have to say is a bit large. But there's a lot of community building and network building amongst the cohort. And they then, once they go back to their own country, they can support each other. And so it's really, helping to build an ecosystem in the different regions.
Well, I will say that, Christa, when I look at people that are connectors, and I consider you a massive connector, you know
Okay.
so many people and you talk to so many different companies out there. I can honestly say that I've been to a number of different events that Christa has put on, and every once in a while I'll get an email say, "Hey Keith, we've got a group coming in from Austria, or we got a group coming in from Australia, and would you want to come out and meet with us and do things?" So one, I get to go to a really nice event out at CIC and get to network with some people. It's great networking. For those of you that don't network a lot, let me tell you something. There's no better way from a
Mm,
business perspective to get to know people in other businesses than to go to these network events and talk with them and meet with them in a social setting. You get to really understand what's out there. Some of these settings are more formal where you got to present what your company does and all this kind of stuff. But for the most part, sometimes we do a lot of these networking events. I actually myself have gotten business out of some of these events. I know that Chris had put on an event tying Massachusetts-based companies to Canadian companies. And
that's
I
right.
can tell you that I've got two companies that I work with to this day that I started with from one of those events. So Krista, I know that what you do is very valuable, and that I get a lot out of it myself. One thing
Mm.
you mentioned a little bit that you work with other industry sectors. Tell us a little bit more. This is driving the business of science, but let's talk a little bit more. What other industry sectors do you work with?
Well, so actually we are pretty industry agnostic. And what that means is essentially it definitely has to be innovation driven. It has to be innovative. It should be cutting edge, if you will. But we feel that a lot of the work we do is actually helping companies think strategically how you enter a new market, how you position yourself. And that doesn't really matter if you're in a laser industry or if you're IT sector or robotics. So I would say that we probably spend about half the companies we work with are in life sciences, perhaps a little bit more. But then some of the some very interesting companies come from completely different sectors. We work with a company from Slovakia that, for example, is developing a new material to put on hockey sticks for blades on a hockey stick. And so it actually replaces the tape that you have to kind of, put around your hockey stick, and it drives the puck better. And this guy has been so successful, the CEO, he was with us for several months, and he won Mass Challenge, one of the industry sectors there, and now he's been half, I think, the Olympic team from the last hockey the Olympics, the hockey team used his tape. So that was, we had absolutely no former, obviously, experience with hockey tapes, but that was really fun. You just never know what you get. Or right now, we also have a fantastic company from Northern Ireland that is developing a electric boat that actually lifts above the water, and it almost is like a hybrid between an airplane and it is about several feet above the water. And
Interesting.
it's really fantastic. And they already raised a couple $100 million, actually more $300 million. And so you will hear about them because they're just opened an office in New York. And again, there's just a fantastic company. So you just never know, and I think as Keith mentioned, we work with companies from around the world. And so one of the cohorts in Northern Ireland, for example, is usually a pretty large cohort, and about half of them are life sciences. And then there's all sorts of, like, this boat, the flying boat, if you will. So yeah, and we see a lot of robotics. We see a lot of IT, different, AI obviously is pretty dominant right now, which goes across all different industry sectors.
Sure.
But yeah.
Well, it was interesting. When I first met you, that was with obviously the Mass Office of International Trade and Investment, and that was a state-run organization. Obviously, the state was putting money into that from an economic development perspective. The programs that you mentioned, how do you? They must be pretty pricey to put these things together. Who pays for those kind of things? What's the finances behind some of that?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. So there's no US or Massachusetts money involved at all. I mean, we are a small for-profit consultancy, if you will. And so all the programs that we run, the expenses for those are covered by a sponsoring organization in the country of origin. So, for example, in Northern Ireland, it would be a group called Catalyst, which is a public-private partnership, and so they are the sponsors. It's very precisely budgeted, if you will, how many companies can come, and exactly we figure out what the costs are. Some programs we do have some backing from the EU. Again, these are very competitive and usually, but we are not the ones that have to go after those grants. It's usually the sponsoring organization, which typically is an economic development organization, regional government, could be university. And a program we're actually doing right now is with university in Chile. It's the largest research university in Latin America, Católica, in Santiago, Chile. And again, they are selecting professors that actually want to figure out the research they have been working on for so long, for many years, that should they start a company and spin it out. So this program is sponsored by this university that may have some additional backing from local government sources. But it's kind of different, but usually it's some economic development organization that has an interest to build an ecosystem, that has an interest to really actually create jobs, if you will, because our job is not to get these companies relocate. Absolutely not. Our job is to make these companies successful so that they can actually hire people in their country of origin. And if they establish an office here, then this should be incremental and it should be additive and not replacing the jobs in their country.
Fantastic. So you mentioned Chile and South America. So tell me, do you focus, is it really truly global, or is it mostly EU? Is it South America? Is it where do the countries of origin come from?
It really covers a very, very, broad spectrum. We don't discriminate against any country, and I have to say we're very fortunate that most what we do is inbound. So it's a lot of referrals from regions or universities or economic development organizations that sometimes speak with each other and refer projects to us. So we've worked yes, with probably a good part of from in Europe, from Lithuania to the Scandinavian regions, to Spain, Italy, Portugal, Austria, Hungary. But also right now, actually, we see a lot of growth in Asia. And that's really very interesting. Right now, we're working on 2 projects in Korea, and then we're going to also have a project in Japan. And we find that the Asian market is 75% of the world population. If you think about it, it's a huge growth market. And for so many years, countries like, for example, Japan, were really more inward focused. They're really kind of, not as much open to the outside to some extent. And now they're really making a big effort to support entrepreneurship and go away from what used to be perhaps the typical standard for people to finding a job, was to work in a very large company and work your way up, if you will. And entrepreneurship and startup companies was a little bit viewed with suspicion as to, because failure is not really tolerated in some of these markets from a cultural perspective. And as we all know, startups have a certain amount of risk, right?
Yes, they do.
You know that, right, Keith? So there's many opportunities to not make it right and to fail, and which failure here in the United States it's totally accepted, and you assume you will learn from from failure, and next time you build a company, maybe you will not make the same mistake again. But in Asian markets, the culture just isn't quite there yet. But so there's a very intense push though right now from government officials in both Korea as well, South Korea as well as Japan, actually, to support entrepreneurship. So we see a lot of programs right now and a lot of interest from these markets.
Interesting. Well, it's for most people out there, probably don't know this, but as a company, Court Square deals with a lot of international companies. We're worldwide in nature, and I have lots of different consultants from different countries that we work with. And if I find any company that's looking to do something here in the US, I always refer them to Christa. and to Mass Global Partners. I think it's
Thank
important
you.
that they get to know who we are and what the other companies are, and they have such a wealth of knowledge. And I think it's important that, we tie them in, and I think it's great that we can set up some of those things. What are some of the really cool companies that you've seen, particularly in life science, that have come into the US? I know that I've been to a couple sessions with you that I thought that was amazing. Some of the technologies that were brought in. Can you just name a few of those?
Oh, well, gosh, there's so many of them. I mean, it's right now, actually, there's a very cool company that we are just in the process of really learning more about them, but they're actually from Korea, and they're using retinal images to a very simple retinal image. So imagine you go to the eye doctor, a retinal image to actually predict cardiovascular disease.
Wow.
And it should be, if this is well executed, and that should really be able to do a lot of, preventive work to prevent diseases. It's not only cardiovascular, they're also working on kidney diseases. So they have lots of patents. They're going to come in a few weeks. And I'd be happy to invite you, Keith, if you would like to meet them.
Oh, I'd love to. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, so that's I think we're very excited about that, because they are they look like a standout, but there's a long way, a pathway, of course, to really get to the market and make all the steps correctly and find the right partners and get all the financial resources and so forth. But that's really a company that's very much we're looking forward to working on. We've seen gosh, a lot of companies in not only therapeutics, there's a lot of digital health companies, and we all know this has had a little bit of a challenge sometimes, especially also from the reimbursement perspective. But we do see a lot of digital health companies. We see a lot of diagnostics, which I think that's definitely a big growth market as well.
I know that I mentioned, I met a company that I think it was either Austria or one of the European visits that they were doing something about liver disease, and they had a diagnostic that they had that could do it from a simple drop of blood, I think, to figure out some liver disease. So I think that was fantastic. I think that, we think that and we are, I mean, granted, Massachusetts, people look at Massachusetts as a great place to come to look for talent and for just in general, look at innovative companies that are coming out here, particularly in the life science. But there are some really amazing companies that are all around the world that I've met through Christa's organization and through just going to some of the events at CIC. So I think that's fantastic. On a little different topic, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that companies may have about coming to the US?
Well, that's a very, very good question, a very loaded question, Keith. That's an excellent question.
Maybe in this time and day and age, it's even more misconceptions.
Oh, well, let's leave that apart. But I think one of the biggest misconceptions in my experience has been that companies feel it's easy to get money. So let's face it, most startups are looking for money in order to grow. And they, companies from anywhere in the world see there's quite a bit of venture capital money or risk money in the United States, especially in these hubs, like if that's San Francisco or Boston. And they feel like if they just need a little money, it will be easy to get a little money because there's so much money. And as we all know, there's also so much competition for the money. And if you really actually understand how a venture capitalist or investors think, they are not risk seekers. And that's another misconception. They think they're looking for a risk. They're looking for opportunities. So the opportunity has to be bigger than and more important than the perceived risk for an investor to actually, look at that. And if you're looking at the numbers, it's actually pretty scary. But I just recently talked to a VC firm, and they look at 600 proposals a year. And you know how many they invest in?
10?
Oh gosh, no, 1 or 2.
Wow.
So it's, I mean, perhaps it's 3 1 year depending, but the ratio it's pretty depressing if you think about it. So again, the misconception from international side is there's so much money, so it's easy to get the money. And of course, to take a little money, it takes the same amount of time for an investor to do the due diligence and analyze the company. And it's about building a company, not just giving them money. So they don't have enough hours in the day to really support the companies with all the advice and counsel. So they sometimes rather write larger checks than a small check. If you give them $50,000 or $100,000, it takes the same amount of money than if you give them $1 million.
Yeah.
So that's definitely, I think, one big misconception. The other misconception that comes to mind is that companies think the US is one market. It's the United States. Well, the name may say United States, but as we all know, United States is many different markets. I mean, there are 50 states, and not even every state is necessarily the same market. If you just compare the media market, I think they have hundreds of different media markets, how they are even, large states like Texas or California. It's not even within a state, is it one market. So I think there's a lot of learning and exploration to do for companies coming into the US to see where does the product best fit, and where is the East Coast and the West Coast, and there's a difference between Texas. I mean, Massachusetts and Oklahoma are not the same market, and California and Texas are not the same market. So that's another, I think, misconception. Another one that comes to mind is that even if there may be an interest amongst investors, they underestimate the due diligence that serious investors are doing. And actually, it is quite astounding. And when we have our programs, we usually invite some investors to do a session on due diligence so that the companies actually know what to expect, because it goes really, really very deep. And no stone is left untouched. And I think international companies, when they feel they can raise money here, they think that it's easy, and then they don't think about due diligence being a really complex issue. So those are just a couple of things that come to mind.
So tell me a little bit about MassGlobal Partners. We're coming up on time, but I wanted to find out. You said you're a for-profit company. I met you early when you were with the state. But tell me a little bit about MassGlobal Partners, and how do you get out there, get the word out that you're out there, or does people just find you? I know who you are, but how do people get to know who you are?
Well, thank you. Thanks for the question. So we are based here at the Cambridge Innovation Center, and there is a core team of 4 of us. And then we are actually very fortunate to have a pool of mentors that are probably at least 50 plus. And we rely on these mentors to pull them in as industry experts, or, for feedback roundtables and so forth. So basically, what we really do is we really try, as I said earlier, to move the needle when companies come here, to really make them really work hard. So which means that we have sessions as in not only how to pitch to a US audience and how you get your value proposition, we really force them to do some customer discovery. Because a lot of companies, we work with scientists, let's face it. I mean, you work with scientists, Keith, right? So scientists are great, but they really think the science is for them more important than how they can make money and how the business side works. So we really have to get them out of the shell. Many of the scientists are a little bit introverted. So we really need to get them out of their scientific and science thinking, and have them think through how they're actually going to get to the market, how they're going to make money. And they have to make connections, and they have to do networking. I mean, it's easy for you. You're a networker, Keith, and I don't mind it either. But I mean, I like it. But a lot of scientists they have to learn that. So that's certainly something we definitely push in our programs, and we really try to get them to understand how also, like, for example, investors think, how a potential client thinks, right? Because you can't just say, okay, I have a fantastic product, you need to buy it. You need to think, where does this product fit into your client's market? How does it solve a problem that they may have, or really where the needs are? How do you cover that? So it's really hands-on. And as I said, there's a lot of cohort building, a lot of network building, and you can go to our website, or you can call Keith if you're interested to learn more, and you can connect us.
That sounds great. Christa, as we're coming up on time, any last thoughts for the audience?
Well, I'd love to, we'd love to talk to people if anyone has any interest. And if you have a great idea to start a business and grow a business, go for it. I mean, just do your homework. There are no shortcuts, as we all know, but there's a lot of people, which is quite here encouraging in not only Boston area, Massachusetts, everywhere. There are a lot of experienced people that are willing to help you. There are a lot of people that on a even pro bono basis are willing to be mentors and paid forward. And that's another thing. International companies are always astounded how much time mentors are willing to give to really honestly try to help other people. And I think that's so. If you have a great idea, go for it. Talk to people, check it out. Ask, don't ask for money, ask for advice. And I think you just talk to people and ask them what they think about your idea, and get as much feedback as you possibly can.
That's fantastic. Well, everyone, this has been Driving the Business of Science. Christa, that's been fantastic. I love the conversation. And good luck to you guys at MassGlobal Partners. I know that you guys are very busy, and just keep those invitations coming up. You know
All
that
right.
if I can make it, I'll be there. So
Okay, great. I hope to see you. Well, lots coming on in September and October. I'll see you there.
if there's any that you want to mention right now, go for it real quick, and I'll make sure that we'll get there.
Okay. Yeah, well, we have, as I mentioned, a cohort from Korea coming in. So there will be some shark tank sessions, if you will. We have a cohort from Chile coming in late September, and then the Austrians in October.
Fantastic.
And so once we get we usually have a networking reception, so to help these companies build a network. So we'll let you know.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
And everybody, this has been a Driving the Business of Science podcast. Thank you very much. Christa, again, thank you very much for being here. Have a great day, everyone. Take care.
And thanks for inviting me. Thanks. Bye.